I want to ask you a question. How much do you think it takes to put a drug to the market? Maybe 100 million, maybe 50 million, maybe 500 million? I'm guessing you don't know. This is the next episode of the Paris OG podcast, where we have 3-episode podcast on the Biotech series. We talk about finances, we talk about funding, we talk about the connection between physicians and financiers in biotech, the trends, where the future is going when it comes to patient care in oncology. So let's talk the numbers. Boom, bust, investments in biotech.
Mm-hmm. I think probably
how does it work?
Start of COVID.
Yeah,
because it's really COVID was a kind of new dawn for the industry.
Wow.
I think if you'd spoken to a lot of people before COVID and said, what's a biotech? They wouldn't have been able to give you a good answer. And obviously we had this global pandemic where
everything was shaking, right?
Yeah, and relatively small companies suddenly became incredibly important to the world's population overnight almost.
Imagine that.
And obviously that resulted in simply vast institutional investment globally in these companies, where money was just pouring. And companies went from having small market values to being worth billions pretty much overnight. Mm-hmm. And obviously that resulted in effective vaccines, and it was a fantastic way of demonstrating how investment moves things forward. Mm-hmm. Like it's the ultimate example.
Money,
you take no drug.
Money makes the world go round in biotech as well.
And you poured money at a problem, and within 10, 11 months you had a solution to it. So that's the kind of very kind of flashy headline example, and it's the easiest one to kind of understand. Big problem, big money, big solution.
Big solution there.
After the pandemic was over, there was a kind of bit of a golden age for about just under a year maybe, where the money hung around. And then obviously the return on investment diminished, and then institutional investors started to realign their investment priorities. What we've seen since then is a significant number of smaller biotechnology firms, which are maybe spin-outs from universities or small investor-funded firms, go bankrupt.
Right.
Because the money just dried up. Mm-hmm. We've obviously then seen a downturn in the global financial market that's increased the cost of borrowing. The cost of money has increased.
Right. Inflation as well.
Inflation has kicked in, and that's had further knock-ons in that a lot of early-stage biotechs are funded by venture capital. At very high risk, it's high risk, high reward.
Yeah, high risk, high reward.
And I think both sides know that, and it's a model that, when it's done under the traditional lines that it's always been done under, works quite nicely for both sides. That model's slightly broken down at the moment. Mm-hmm. Getting hold of venture capital has become quite challenging, and certainly VCs are less likely to hand out money to companies that don't have very solid proof of concept or very solid preclinical data. They're wanting to see more data before they'll invest their money. They're wanting to come in at a slightly later stage than they were prepared to come in at traditionally, perhaps.
Well, this is like, this is the norm for every industry, even in software development. Yeah.
And obviously pharmaceuticals and biotech is not special in that regard. The trouble is for us, because of the length of time it takes to develop a product.
What is the average length of time?
10 years.
10 years?
Yeah.
So wait, let's assume
a decade.
I invest in some biotech company and I have to wait 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that,
and I'm not sure.
Yeah, But the difference is because it's high reward. It's high risk, high reward. Yeah. You wait your 10 years, and if you get a successful drug to market, that's very profitable for you.
But people don't want to wait longer. There's that 10 years well, it's an average, but even that's fairly minimal. You know, the company that we used to work for, from the inception of that company spinning out of Oxford University to a drug going to market was, over 20 years. That's a very complex technology. It was really innovative, and just the expertise to just create those molecules was just brand new. It was being
expertise had to be created, literally from scratch.
So that's really innovation. That's 20 years.
So for 20 years, they keep getting money and money forward, right? Because if you take initial investment, at some point you're going to dry up.
You have multiple rounds of funding.
Multiple rounds of hold.
And I mean, I think you're also reliant on multiple rounds of really, really intelligent, really smart people being committed enough to devote a significant proportion of their career to doing
it takes
something.
it takes a lot to be with the doing the same thing for 20 years,
And it might not be
expecting
successful.
results. Yes,
That's so it's not just the money, it's actually the dedication of all these people that sit in the background and really are passionate about this or whatever field they're in within biotech. But so yeah, we have a very difficult funding model at the moment. The other thing to comment on is that as a result of the difficulty in that funding model, we've seen what's been termed a wave of consolidation across the industry, where big pharmaceutical companies who came out of the pandemic with a lot of money in their pockets have used that money and used that buying power to purchase intellectual property or just to purchase biotechs outright and consolidate them. Now, there's, like anything, pluses and minuses there. Plus is obviously that you're saving potentially incredible technology or incredible ideas. You're providing them with stability, providing them with an environment in which they
putting food on the table.
Well, put food on the table, but also continue doing that really important research and continue developing those drugs that otherwise might have been lost to a liquidation or a failure of the company. The downside is obviously you take small companies that tend to be rather quick at decision making, rather focused, because they're doing just
the smaller the better.
small
Straight,
team, you know, they're highly mobile teams. They're very
motivated as well.
and you inevitably and by necessity place them into the ecosystem of a large pharmaceutical company. And there are various ways of doing that, and I'm not an expert on it, so I won't comment heavily on it, but I would say that in general, having worked with both ends of that spectrum commercially, you get a much faster response and much more rapid progress with a small biotech. Obviously, you're not achieving as much as a big pharmaceutical company, but it's a quick process.
The speed,
Pharmaceutical companies, because they're big, because they have to worry about reputations, they have to worry about making
Very
sure that
slower.
everything they're doing is focused on
the
patients.
bigger you are, the slower you get.
It just slows the process down. So obviously the worry there is that it's not that the drug won't necessarily come to market, it's the worry that it comes to market less quickly, which means in the meantime patients continue sadly to suffer from diseases for which there might be a therapy that could help them. But equally, if the money didn't exist, those therapies wouldn't exist at all. So it's not a complaint, it's just a commentary on a fact of life.
Yeah.
And you mentioned motivation in biotech, so that's really important because in biotech, you'll often only have one molecule, or maybe two. But if you only have one molecule, you are going to do everything you can to get that molecule developed and to market. Whereas, you know, once drugs become part of the huge ecosystem of a big pharma company, it's much more likely to be killed. Even if it's promising. There was an example of this in uveal melanoma recently, which is a rare eye cancer, hardly any treatments for it. We've worked on the only approved treatment for it. And a big company did, I think they reversed the decision. I don't know how it developed, but they did stop development of a drug for this rare eye cancer, because if you think about a big company, they've got a portfolio of dozens of drugs in development for different indications, and they have to make financial decisions. And, you know, so drug X here, you know, maybe that for an organization like that, it's not the best place to place their money in terms of return on investments and for their shareholders, even though that drug's needed for patients.
So in that situation, can they sell that IP to another
That happens, yeah. Sometimes they vanish, sometimes the IP is, sometimes the people who worked on it will spin it out as a biotech again.
Or sell it on to a company doing
more focus to that.
Yeah,
to that
you might look and go, we can upload this to a company with a more focused pipeline.
Yeah.
I mean, the real cynics, and I guess the most cynical example of how this is negative for patients is, in a big pipeline, you might have existing products on market which have some years left of on their patent. So you've got exclusive rights to that, to use or to sell that drug for a certain period of time in most healthcare economies. If you develop a better version of that drug, or you know, something that competes with that in your own pipeline, the most cynical decision is to prevent or slow development, to ensure that you're getting the maximum commercial benefit from the existing drug. Now, I think that probably doesn't happen all that often anymore, but it's certainly an example of where government and regulators need to be mindful of what companies are doing to ensure that patient safety still, or patient benefit still remains the core of what the industry is trying to achieve. And investors should understand that, I think. We should understand that investors are handing over their hard-earned cash and that we have to use it wisely, develop things as quickly as possible. Regulators need to understand that is necessary and they should support that increase in speed. But ultimately, government needs to be aware of the fact that in private industry there's always the risk of things being done for potentially the wrong reasons, and that they should be aware of the fact that it's appropriate to intervene at a certain point to ensure that the industry is kept honest, for even against the benefits of, or even if it's not in the best interest of, say, investors, but because of, making return on investment. You have to be mindful that, unlike any other ecosystem, what we're trying to do here is improve patient health. And that is a slightly unique position of responsibility that we sit in, where we have to be mindful of making decisions that negatively impact patients.
Right.
It's not just negatively impact finances.
Yeah.
And the finances should always be a secondary consideration. They're very important.
For a physician, not for a finance.
But for the drug company, and even the financiers, they should understand that they're investing in healthcare. You're investing in the healthcare economy. That is a unique responsibility with potentially good,
for return.
Both ethical, moral, social reward and financial rewards at the end of it. But it isn't the same as investing in
Bitcoin.
Investing in crypto. It isn't, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't. It's not special, but it should have slightly different rules and a slightly different understanding when you hand over money and put money into it. You have I think you have a responsibility at any part in that complex, in regulatory, pharmaceutical investment. There is a responsibility to patients that comes out of it.
Yeah. So usually let's assume after 10 years, you launch, for some reason, you go bust. Say, regulators sort of like didn't approve your drug or something. Usually,
that's the classic.
It happens frequently. Yeah. Well, what do most biotech companies do? Do you pack up, say your IP, or do you reinvent yourself? Is it difficult?
It depends on the molecule. Sometimes that molecule could be picked up, the IP could be sold, could be purchased by a bigger company. It's circumstantial, but generally in that scenario, that biotech ceased to exist. The IP may or may not be picked up and development continued in a different line or something.
It's quite a depressing landscape.
It's often end of the line.
Yeah.
So for a physician, you have to look for a job elsewhere, or?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an important distinction here as well, that people, certainly even friends, colleagues of mine in hospitals, the role that physicians play in the biotechnology industry is still slightly poorly understood.
Yeah,
I would say even by clinicians or even by physicians, it's slightly poorly understood, because we sort of vanish from a hospital. You become a doctor. The kind of traditional expectation is you go into a hospital, you treat patients, you come home. Biotech's very different. You sit in an office as a doctor, and you still have a clinical responsibility, which is to oversee those drug trials, develop the best possible drug trial, understand the landscape, understand the technology, and apply it to patients. But you are sat behind a desk a lot of the time.
What you talked about the bigger responsibility between the pharma companies, biotech investors, regulators. Within pharma and biotech, a significant proportion of that responsibility to make sure that the companies are acting for the best in the best interest of patients. Some of that responsibility obviously sits with the medics that are in the industry, because that's what we do.
But like a gatekeeper almost within a company, actually, because you can have commercial pressures, you can have fantastic research that comes out, but making it safe to apply clinically is kind of where we sit as a role. To that end, we're still regulated and subject to the same rules as hospital doctors for the most part. Like, we still function as a clinician. We're still physicians. So our role is commercial, but we have constraints on what we can and can't do.
The Hippocratic Oath. We still have to work to that.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's talk about scandals.
She went to jail recently. Elizabeth Holmes.
Elizabeth Holmes.
So quick facts for us all. 700 million in venture capital and private investment, $10 billion valuation at peak in 2013-14. Blood tests for developing or for diagnosing
Cancer? No?
Also,
all sorts of diseases. It was like a multi-disease platform.
wild.
And so Theranos, I think, is an excellent example of where the balance in that cycle of kind of pharmaceutical investment regulation goes horribly wrong.
It's an outlier. It's an extreme
outlier.
It's an extreme outlier, but it perfectly encapsulates the risk of it going wrong. Like that cycle has to exist in balance, and Theranos is the most public example of it going really, really awry. And like you say, it shouldn't be taken to be the norm.
Right.
People get into regulatory spats all the time. It's normal. It's part of the push and pull between a drug company and a regulator. And normally they're resolved very professionally, very amicably. Further data is generated. Pharmaceutical companies on the whole are very happy to go and generate more data if it's requested.
Yeah, right.
In the case of Theranos, I think it was a brilliant piece of marketing with no substance under no research underlying it, and somehow everyone got blinded.
How do you get $700 million from financiers without them checking or verification?
If VC is going to invest in a biotech, or if a biotech's going to be acquired by a big pharma company, as stating the obvious, there's due diligence, and scientific experts will pore over the data. How that didn't happen with Theranos, I don't know, because there wasn't substance to the claims. So that's why I say it's an outlier. I don't know how that happened. I don't know enough detail about the case, but it amazes me.
I think it was very well marketed, probably, and attracted a lot of investment because it promised to do something so incredible.
Yeah.
Like you say, we wouldn't know enough to comment in depth, but I think it speaks to that high risk, high reward attitude within investment.
Especially from California.
Yeah. I wonder if they weren't experienced biotech investors.
Investors, potentially. Yeah. I think that's another thing that you touched on something there that's very important, is that investment in biotech not only requires exceptional due diligence, as it should do, because otherwise you're taking money and spending it unwisely when you could have invested it on a product that would be better or has better science underlying it. So that's thing one. And secondly is really understanding the market you're investing into. It's not an investment product, if you will, that is suitable for any old investment company. People who invest in this tend to have either a specialist division focused on it, where they employ even people like ourselves. They employ
because
they employ investment analysts with years of industry experience on just the one industry, because of its unique profile. So that's kind of an important part of it, actually, is making sure that you as a company are attracting the right investors. Because if you work with the wrong ones, it can go really bad and wrong. They're not going to understand you. You won't understand them. You're not talking the same language. They're not going to understand the requirement to suddenly delay a development process because you need more data.
It never goes smoothly.
It never works well.
Right. And you have to be just sit tight and keep faith. If you have faith in that science, then you have to accept the fact that there will be the odd failure here and there. There'll be manufacturing issues. There'll be
a dead end,
quality. There'll be developmental dead ends somewhere. It's just the nature of it, and you need investors that are comfortable with that.
And on the whole, the big players that we've experienced are fantastic in that regard. They're extremely patient. These kind of individuals or companies put up hundreds of millions of dollars in return for equity most often, but they're taking significant risk with their capital, and they are very patient about waiting for a return on that investment. They're very tolerant of the scientific process, which is something that is absolutely essential to make it function. Without it, it doesn't function. Everything grinds to a halt. So. Yeah, I mean, the other thing to touch on here is, and we were discussing this yesterday, is this idea that the only thing a biotech company can do is develop a drug. what you're actually doing, especially when you've got novel molecules or you're in the kind of cutting edge end of things, is creating a new ecosystem, which is one of the things that we're very keen to do here. And that's the idea that everything you develop along the way, so you develop trials,
Right.
which means you need to develop the trial infrastructure. You develop regulatory relationships, which means you've got expertise in advising within that field. You develop networks of academics and researchers and clinicians globally that we...
It's an economy ecosystem on its own, yeah.
And actually, historically, biotechnology firms specifically are really poor at monetizing that. Mm-hmm. They're really poor at making commercial benefit from the journey, not just the destination, which is obviously something you absolutely should be taking advantage of. If you, as a small company, if you've got expertise that's commercially valuable along the way, you should be sending that to market to help improve your finances, improve your drug development, get the drug to market quicker, reduce your reliance on funding. Mm-hmm. So that I think is something with our initiative that we're very much hoping can be the case and can serve as a model for other smaller enterprises out there to look upon as additional funding sources. You know, there's absolutely no point in spending thousands of man hours developing a functional oncology trial center, for example, which is a highly specialized thing.
Right.
You know, it really, really requires some very unique, even physical infrastructure, unique staffing, a unique setup. And if you then just use that for only your own trials, you're depriving other patients from who are on drug trials with other companies of access to that facility. Mm-hmm. You're not profiting from it yourself. It makes no sense. I think it speaks to the fact that clinicians traditionally are not great at business management. They're not businessmen, they're clinicians. Being in the biotech world is a bit unusual because you develop a kind of commercial, you have to develop a kind of commercial
acumen, right?
Because you are working in a business. Where
you have to answer to some people with numbers.
You answer to investments, there's numbers behind them. You work in a public healthcare system, you never think about that really, at a clinical level. Here you have to, and so you start to see the opportunity to commercialize parts of this process in order to reduce your reliance and to return money to your investors quicker.
Yeah, and by having that self-sustaining, potentially profitable drug development and clinical trial ecosystem that allows, for instance, this region to develop medicines and produce clinical data for this population, and not be as reliant on the fairly sort of European and North America dominated industry.
Even for health tourism, there's benefits here. Yeah. So obviously, the UAE is a hub for health tourism because of the quality of its hospitals.
And the infrastructure as well, everything.
It's very international nature.
Right.
You've got people from 150 plus nationalities existing all in one place. And you have a unique set of tax benefits to functioning a business here. It's a very business-friendly environment. If you develop this infrastructure here, there's absolutely no reason why, given the fact you've got health tourism, you can't bring patients in from other
countries,
racial groups, other ethnicities, to come and take part in personalized medicine trials here, because it's such a fantastic hub for doing it.
Right.
You can do things at a much more business-friendly cost than you can do them in Western Europe or North America.
Do you think it's more cost-effective here? Would it be?
I think the very high cost of running a business in those jurisdictions.
Not here?
Not here. Running a business here is very cost effective from a tax point of view. You have a very supportive government.
Right.
You need government involvement in these projects to make them run anywhere in the world to an extent. Mm-hmm. But especially here, you need the support of the UAE government to make the most of the ecosystem they're providing. They have these fantastic healthcare projects in artificial intelligence. They're building a fantastic new oncology hospital here in Dubai in the next couple of years. They're very focused on making
breakthroughs.
Not only making the life better for their citizens, but actually creating a business environment along the way that's fantastic. So I also do see health tourism as part of taking advantage of the ecosystem, where an essential part of taking benefit from the ecosystem we're hoping to create.
Right.
And that broadens your horizon beyond just this region eventually, in that if you can prove competitive in a marketplace that's dominated by North America and Western Europe by being more cost-effective, more fluid, more proactive, providing a unique advantage by being here, people will come.
Yes.
Businesses will make investment here, or international pharmaceutical companies will see a business case for investment in that infrastructure here. So it has many upsides beyond the upsides initially just to the small ecosystem we want to create.
So you believe Dubai could be a biotech hub?
I believe it should be a biotech hub. It's not could be, it should be. It has all of the ingredients necessary to create a world-class
Diversity is here.
Research and development hub. You've got the diversity, you've got the high quality of healthcare in general here. You've got a government that's supportive and proactive. You've got it's just a can-do attitude. And I think that as we've seen Western Europe and North America struggle financially, but a government...
Yeah, a lot of money is moving here as well.
A lot of money is moving here. A lot of investment is being moved or is being eyed up here. And it's just so interconnected, it doesn't seem possible that it couldn't become a hub with the right investment and the right attitude.
And a chance to, I sort of mentioned earlier, the big machine of pharma in Europe and North America is built on decades of experience, which is cool. But it's, that's also baggage to a degree. Whereas with, building a new ecosystem, we can take that expertise, but make everything more efficient. We can almost leapfrog the established, machines in Western Europe and North America.
It's like a dreadnought principle. So, small history lesson.
Okay.
You have, back at the start of the 20th century, the British developed a whole new class of warships called dreadnoughts. They're vastly technologically advanced, better than anything else on the market. The trouble is, once you've reached that point, all it takes is for someone to come along and cherry pick the best bits of that, and they've caught up with you. Cool. And that's the opportunity we have here, is to use all of the really advanced systems and environment here.
Then you leave the baggage behind,
and just go, right, we're going to accelerate things at a vast speed to not only catch up but surpass. Because that's the other thing I really fully expect to happen here, is not just that we can create an environment that's on parity with North America or Europe after
you can surpass it.
60 years of development. The attitude here is so proactive that you can surpass it. And that actually the investment in technology, certainly AI in healthcare here, is a huge investment by the government. Using that very powerful technology to gain an advantage in the marketplace, it should almost be inevitable. So I think that's really one of the reasons I'm keen to do it here and nowhere else. There's this huge benefit just waiting to be tapped into that we can take advantage of.
That's excellent. So now, one of the things that you understand with biotech is that, look at, for instance, Cambridge and Oxford. If you're coming out of Cambridge or Oxford, there is a high likelihood that you're going to be in some spotlight. So whoever is going to pour out money into biotech is going to look out for you.
Yes, that is certainly till now the case. Yeah, in the vast majority of instances.
And it's not just the people; it's the actual ideas that often originate in Cambridge, Oxford.
Okay, cool. So
centers of innovation.
So how do you think it will affect funding here?
So they have excellent tertiary education and excellent capability for research here. Because it's a less developed healthcare economy, and because the universities simply haven't been around for
long, right,
means that the focus remains on those ancient institutions which have developed centers of innovation and centers of excellence and had centuries to develop a reputation. That does not mean that the quality of research here isn't or can't be as good. What it needs is funding, and it needs a platform globally to demonstrate its excellence. We know, we can see the government of the UAE working very hard to achieve that for its universities. I've been to several conferences here recently where data has been presented locally that's of a very high standard, but it doesn't get the international recognition necessarily at the moment. So part of the ecosystem we're trying to create with IODXB is to utilize our network of preclinical researchers and clinicians and get them to work with tertiary education institutions here and the government here to generate a research program, a research exchange program, where we bring in specialist talent from other countries, get them to work with Emirati researchers, Emirati scientists to develop the program, and then send those Emirati researchers, scientists, clinicians back to those institutions, those partner institutions, to be able to kind of embed themselves in that process, embed themselves in the research there and see where it's at, and then bring back those learnings to accelerate the progress of, not only the progress of understanding here, the progress of generating knowledge, but the reputation and platform for those universities. And that's not actually a novel process in truth. That is how all universities generate what you might call clout, or will generate reputation. And it takes
years.
It can take years, but the benefit here is they've got good universities, good support from government, and because it's this international hub, you've got an amazing ability to bring people here.
It's easy to get here.
To expand the knowledge base, and really expanding the knowledge base is absolutely crucial. And by doing that, you will expand reputation, you'll generate opportunities for these universities and for these clinicians, clinics to exist on an international stage and present on an international stage, which in turn begets more desire for people to come here. Mm-hmm. You generate a kind of self-sustaining wheel of academia and research, and from that comes an ever-expanding base of knowledge that's relevant to the region, relevant to the people here, which is the thing we lack currently, because it's not happened yet. And we want to make it happen.
So when it comes to funding, you mentioned that one has to be in the industry to understand funding, because you can't just give money to biotech companies, because if you don't understand them, they won't understand you. Now, since the biotech ecosystem here is still being developed, how do you see the funding in this scenario? Because if it's still not matured, it means the funding aspect as well is going to be affected.
So the great news here is that the government have employed people who have worked internationally.
Good.
And therefore do understand it.
Right.
So they have Emirati members of government here that have international experience.
Yeah.
So, and I've listened to someone speak very, very recently from Abu Dhabi Health Department. They're very clear on exactly what needs to be done, exactly the kind of financing that needs to be done to support it. The benefit here is that, as I said, you need to work with government here to do these things. It will work better that way. So the first step I see is you partner with government. You then partner with private holdings here, people who have experience running hospitals, people who have experience running research and development facilities in general. And then the third partnership is you partner with the universities. So the idea is what you've done there is not create so much a company as an initiative that functions commercially. And that's really the aim, is to work with local government, to work with the partners of local government and private sector who have this deep knowledge and can make this successful.
But also the fund, it's inevitably a long-term project. We talked about 10 years to develop a drug. Here we're hoping to develop medicines, but also build the ecosystem, the regulatory and the research ecosystem around that. And really that's the first step. The initial funding isn't funding a specific technology, that's further down the line. The initial funding will be to initiate those academic collaborations that James talked about, and the work on clinical trial functionality. So we'll hit that point where we need to talk about funding for specific technologies further down the line.
Oh, cool.
It is. I mean, most biotechs fund 3 or 4 times over a decade.
Yeah. Was the average a typical biotech company were required to get to market? There should be a median. Let's use a median.
So the perceived wisdom on that is to develop a drug costs about $1 billion.
US.
US, but yeah. That's not, there's a lot of variability there.
$1 billion.
It's probably, I think I saw data a few years ago that was a bit less. It was more like 700 million or something like that, and that's an average, but there's a huge variance there.
Depends on the drug.
Depends
what
on
size of the team required.
Yeah.
And that's why we touched on this idea that building out a commercially functional infrastructure that you can profit from in the meantime to return money to the investors or to keep that spend as low as possible is super important. But it is about $1 billion. And I think the other expectation that investors have perhaps is that cash burn and cash return are in
Yeah, cash burn rate is very important.
but they can be kind of, there's a kind of expectation that they're linear. That's not the case in biotech. Cash burn is peaky depending on your activity. So there will be years or parts of your product development cycle that burn cash very intensely, and then other parts which burn cash less intensely. And that does catch a number of biotechs out, actually. I think they arrange funding, something unexpected occurs in their development cycle, and their cash burn increases, and it can be fatal to them. Which is why working with government is so important, because it ensures that A, there's a degree of oversight, B, that there's an understanding that the products you're creating, certainly within this region, the government needs to have some ownership of that to help secure the funding, because obviously that then becomes an imperative to improve health for citizens, which changes your funding model slightly, because you're not then necessarily looking at having to provide investors with a return immediately. You're providing a holistic benefit to citizens, and you're still generating profit, but there can be more tolerance of this peakiness as a result. Whereas if it was purely privately led, there would instinctually be less tolerance for the peaking, which is, I think, very important. And it's one of the reasons that when you're doing certainly rare diseases, cutting edge molecules, having government support is very important, because you are somewhat stepping into the unknown with the potential to benefit the citizens of that country or the people of that region quite profoundly. But if you're doing it purely with private investment, either you've got to have investors that get it and that understand intimately how that's going to work, or you do it in partnership with government, where they understand there's a greater benefit than just immediate return on investment. Still has to be profitable, but in a slightly different way.
But then not a lot of pressure and, right?
It's not that the pressure's less. I mean, obviously you're still very motivated by the desire to help patients to get it done as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
But you have easier access to regulators. You have easier access to discussions. You have easier access to platform your ideas, all of which make getting an effective process in place easier, without the pressure, the immediacy of the pressure to serve your investors in quite the same way. It isn't a free-for-all. It shouldn't be something that people look upon as a kind of get-out-of-jail-free card for providing a return.
Right.
But it alters the game slightly, which probably does have benefits to patients